As far as the actual metrics, what are the most effective metrics that are measuring the sharing from your research?
Yeah, so right now, if people are sharing via email, there's really no way. You can't, and we found, 70 to 80% of the respondents said that that's their favorite method. And so you can't really capture that, other than you could derive a number. You could do a survey occasionally and then come up with an average, and you could derive a number, plus or minus 5. So the bulk of sharing right now we really can't capture. There are several initiatives underway that will make capturing that sharing number easier. One, Crossref and Counter are working together to trace through the system, through the ether, DOIs. And so if you can just capture DOIs, and you can do that. If people do turn to research sharing networks more, they can capture. So Mendeley and Academia.edu and ResearchGate, that one of the nice things about those kinds of formal systems is that they can capture the amount of sharing. And some benefits of that, sometimes people say, oh, they're going to be following what I'm doing. Well, Google follows what we do in the sense too. But some nice things about that is that it measures the value or the use. The other is that it can help improve systems by looking at patterns of sharing. But of course there are some negatives about that. That means that somebody's capturing use. But downloads do that too. So the idea is to keep it as anonymous as possible.
So what I'm hearing, there's really no ideal way to measure the sharing usage.
Not right now.
And I guess my follow-up question to that is, do you think your research and other research that's being done in this area will eventually lead to a model that we can rely on?
I think so. So part of it's behavioral, and we can't really. I'm measuring behavior and likely behavior and trying to predict future behavior, but I'm not trying to really change behavior. That's up to the organizations and the libraries and the publishers and stuff. But if the systems that can measure, there's two ways of measuring sharing. One is if it's in a general social media system. If it's tweeted, you can measure that by following the DOIs. So you can measure there. If it's within a research wall sharing service like Academia.edu or Mendeley, you can measure there. So if those systems become a part of the workflow, so the easier they are to use, the more people will adopt them. Researchers, the sharing is a means to the end. It is not what they're thinking about. They're thinking about getting the work done, getting credit for it, but also just getting their next project done. So it's got to be part of what they do, and it's got to be easy.
Right.
So I hope that the research we do helps drive system development to make that happen, and also perhaps educational programs and libraries, making people aware of things, and then publishing systems, making it easier, or organizations like Counter and Crossref. So I think they're taking those kinds of results and developing systems that they think will be easier to use.
Is there any way these metrics fit into the more traditional metrics like ISI's impact factor? Does that?
Yes, absolutely, because here we're talking about sharing published work. Now there's a whole other thing you could think about is sharing ideas and sharing non-published work, but really what we're looking at here is these things are published, and then what happens to them once you download them. And of course, the more people they're shared with, the more scholars that read them, the more likely they are to cite them. So it should eventually drive citations up. So sharing is a positive behavior on lots of levels, because it does drive citations up, which drives all those metrics, and it helps scholarship. So it's a positive thing. People feel good about it. It's mechanically now it's getting easier to do, and systems need to make it easier to do in ways that it can be captured if we want to measure sharing.
What conclusions should libraries draw from your findings, and how do you think your findings will eventually impact library services?
Well, it's interesting. Well, I got a really good question at my session today from a librarian who says, I don't know if I want to know about this, that we use download metrics to help drive our collection development and our decision about what we purchase and what we license, and I don't know if I want to know what happens afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was a really good question, because I mean that's a first reaction is, one, I've got the information I need, and I don't want to know if somebody's violating my license or my copyright. I see
Sure.
that, we really don't want to know that. But there are reasons why a library, I think, should care about it, and there are really three reasons. I gave two, but then as I thought about it some more, and we talked about it earlier, there is a third as well. But the first reason is that if indeed download counts are going down, and we have pinned the value of our collection so much on downloads. You don't want to draw the conclusion that the value is less because downloads are going down when actual use may be going up. So part of that is you want to know what's going on so you can measure the true value, and you can give that message. We are enabling access and actually access and use in work-related in science and research and teaching is actually increasing through sharing. So you want to give a bigger picture of value. The other is that if the right now you're using it for metrics for driving collection development decisions in a world that assumes an economic model of subscriptions. It's a small percent of journals that are switching to an open access, a gold open access model. But if we continue to make a shift that way, and that libraries don't have the subscription model, so they're not easy for that, they have to be able to demonstrate their role in providing access in a world when, if it's open access, why do we need a library if you can get everything else? So helping people use the tools, discovery systems, involved in use and reuse becomes important in the library. So they should be thinking about, in a different economic model, what is our role in collections and in scholarship. And then the third role that came to, that we were talking about afterwards, Hazel Woodward, former librarian at Cranfield, who was on this project, brought it up. She said in the UK and Australia and several other countries, the libraries are really getting involved in helping demonstrate the impact of research. They're doing a lot of the bibliometric gathering, they're doing a lot of the downstream value for the institution as a whole. Not just the value of the library, but the value of the scholars at the institution. How does the work that being at that university helps them do, how does that impact society? How does that?
Well, that's a tremendous help for the university. I mean, it's a great service to be providing
It's a
the
great
campus.
service. That's right. And I suspect some are doing that in the U.S. The ones I'm more familiar with, I know I was at a university on a Fulbright in Tampere, Finland, and they have a whole division now, a new division in their library that just does that. And those kinds of metrics, you can do traditional metrics like impact, well, not impact factor, but like citation counting, but also there is this downstream kind of impact. And
you're really not catching it all with the traditional, what we've used in the past.
No.
So you're really getting only part of the picture.
Yeah.
And that does become important if a library is trying to promote itself, its value, trying to point to return on investment and so on.
And help the university show its value.
Right.
So a lot of the role they're doing is showing that our university, the researchers, students and faculty researchers at our university, they are doing research that is widely shared, is in research groups, that is, all of the altmetrics kinds of things are shared in both formal and informal ways. And the librarians are really good people who know about how you gather that information and prepare that information to help the universities demonstrate their value. And so that's a role that I don't see too much yet in the U.S., although I think some are probably doing it. But you see a huge increase in that role in the U.K.
It sounds like we could learn something from some of what's going on in the UK.
Yeah, so I think that, so it's the library, not just the library value, but the value of having the library help the university demonstrate the value of what they do. And you can see how valuable that is to funders. I can think about, I'm at a state-supported institution, and helping our chancellor and provost show the value of the work we do. And sharing is part of that, because it's reach, it's how much particular individual or faculty member, how much their work is shared, and it goes beyond citations.
Yeah. What about vendors and publishers? What can they learn from your findings?
Well, certainly, again, this is a project that included from the beginning publishers and widely Counter and Elsevier as partners, because they're very interested in not only facilitating. So from Counter's perspective, is there a standard that can be made that we can ensure that publishers follow, so that this can be followed? So they're interested in it from a standpoint of how do we facilitate? How do we facilitate the idea of sharing beyond? And what are we doing now that is missing out on some of this? So anybody who's interested in metrics, so that includes Crossref, it includes DataCite, it includes Counter, includes a large variety of, you might call vendors or metrics kind of organizations. Publishers and organizations that are developing systems that facilitate sharing. I would hope that it would help them build in the kinds of system features that facilitate sharing, also influence policies, so that recognizing that sharing is a natural part of scholarship, and see within the constraints of what they have to do in their funding model, and that's their business, not my business. I provide them with the information to use. But, how can you make something work that makes you an integral part of scholarship in a way that you can see what's going on, but not inhibit that kind of behavior. So I think that lots of publishers are interested in doing that, and not just the traditional big publishers, but also the organizations that are developing sharing systems.
Are there any other takeaways that you can point to in the research?
It's interesting. Every time you do a study like this, there's 10 other research questions you think of. So one takeaway is we really, it's kind of early days. We know sharing's happening. We know it's going to increase. We know there's some confusion out there of choices. So the reason email comes out on top is just because it's easy, and the others I'm not, are kind of spread. So a takeaway is really that it is early days. We need to continue to see what people are doing. But I think the main takeaway is that sharing, we need to, as both libraries, publishers, vendors, we need to find ways to facilitate sharing, because the role of all of us is to enable science, social science research, to make it easier, to save the time of people doing it, and so all of these kinds of systems can do that. We need to design good systems that will help that happen.
Well, what's next?
A breather. No, actually, I am in the middle of another project that's related but not completely related, and that is looking at what's the impact of gold open access on research libraries, but the part I'm doing is the behavior. What do scholars think of different publishing models? And they are related, because if you look at the sharing stuff, a lot of it you'd say, oh gosh, that's sort of a maybe, and we can share better if we have open access rather than closed access. I'm not an advocate, again, of one way or another. I'm just kind of looking at behavior. So it's been interesting, and we're just finishing up analyzing that data, again, survey and focus groups, but only in large research institutions in the U.S. and Canada. And it's amazing. We are so immersed in all of these things like open access and all this. But the average scholar is not. There are some who are very knowledgeable positively. There's some who are very knowledgeable negatively. And the vast majority are in the middle, and they want to get their stuff out. And they want to get it out in the way that will have the highest impact in both the figurative and literal sense. And they're not so concerned about what happens afterwards. And so I think beginning to look some more at these issues, it's a matter of education, but it's also a matter of what is it that changes behavior? What is that event or that technology, or what is it that changes, and how and will behavior change, and how quickly will it change? That's something I've been kind of chasing forever, as a lot of people have. But
it's a tremendous challenge, and it's really important, at least as I hear you speaking about this, because we make a lot of assumptions that the findings may not back up. And they may back them up, but they may not, and we won't know unless we do the research.
That's right, and we hear the loud voices on both sides. We don't always hear the middle voices, although libraries have to serve everybody. They've got to serve the the whole range of behavior, and so coming up with solutions that serve everybody but aren't too that are flexible enough. I think that's a continuing challenge.